Yo, what's up, everybody? It's David Brodeur AKA Brilly, and today I can't wait to show you LightStage from Otoy. So I've been using these assets in a lot of my work recently, and I've absolutely fallen in love with them. So today I'm going to give you a design walkthrough where I'm going to take these LightStage assets, we'll bring them into 3D. You'll be able to bring them into any 3D software, and we're going to focus a lot on utilizing these assets to make really cool scenes, cool renders, and stuff like that. So focus a lot on lighting, rendering, and kind of the overall scene and look. So hop in with me and let's do it. All right, so today we're doing a design walkthrough, and we're going to start with just LightStage from Otoy, and that's going to be kind of the base and foundation of everything we're going to make today. But the primary focus is I'm going to try to utilize some of these assets here to make a kind of a visually beautiful frame. And so we're going to focus a lot on lighting and just kind of building a mood. And let's just jump right in and begin kind of crafting this. So I went ahead and got the live viewer, Octane live viewer launched. So after that, I just said import Orbix, and from LightStage, I was just able to download that Orbix and then import it right in here. And we're pretty much good to go. Sometimes I'll just hop into standalone, Octane standalone, and kind of, remove some of the lights that come with the kits with these assets. And so that way I can just do all the lighting on my own. And so I did do that with this one, maybe removed a couple of the other duplicate scans. But this is how you can go in there. You can actually remove all the textures and really just start with this super crazy high resolution scan all on its own. So I went also in here and I did change the overall scale. You'll see in the coordinates, right? But this is really not this kind of a walkthrough. This is more of like, hey, when you have assets, when you need to create a frame, how can you go about doing that? How does the lighting work, and just starting like this. So let's just jump first right into some of these composition settings, and I'll say 2000 by 2000. So we know when we're framing, what the aspect ratio is going to be. So that is kind of an important thing anytime you're designing anything, especially when you're building a composition, is you need to know what the frame size is going to be. So let's hop in here, grab our Octane camera. When I work with cameras, I change the focal length. It's really important to always change the focal length. What's the intention you're kind of trying to go for? If 36 millimeters then that's fine. Then keep 36. But are you trying to distort something? You try to make something feel small or large or closer or further away. I'm going to go with something like maybe like an 80 millimeter, which is going to kind of be really nice, kind of more like beauty photography, portrait kind of thing. I think it's going to look really nice with these assets here, though. Since I'm using the Orbix, and it doesn't actually give me the geometry, right? And so because like moving inside of cinema is based on cursor mode and clicking on an actual object, sometimes I'll throw in just like a really simple like little object like this cube, and that could be like what I use to kind of move around. And I can just say hide this from the render view, so it's not actually rendering here. And that way though, like if I want to move around the scene, right, I can still pivot and access on the center of the head here. So I'm not 100% sure what the framing quite yet is going to be of this. We'll have to find some kind of interesting angles here. I don't know. We'll find something. But again, let's start focusing on the overall lighting and mood of this. So we can add a background, and we probably will do that in just a little bit. But first, let's just kind of think about the lighting. So for this series that I've been going with, where I've been taking these scans and creating something, I've been going for like this kind of more like cool like neon lighting, very atmospheric. And so what I've been doing is I've been coming in here and I've been starting with the fog volume, placing this fog volume into my scene. Let me just hop out of the camera for a second. And let's begin to move this back. So maybe it's only, coming to about half of the head here. And I can kind of scale this down a little bit. Maybe center this again, move it back. I might not need it as large as it is. Maybe reduce the voxel size just a little bit. Let's increase that all the way. Maybe edge feather. Maybe I want something that's really sharp. I'm not 100% sure quite yet. I have gone in here and I've changed this to path tracing. Lighting's going to make a huge difference here. We might find some HDRIs that we like. We might get some area lights. Most likely we'll end up doing both. I'm going to increase the overall density here to something like 400, maybe even higher. Maybe bring this step length down a little bit, like 0.5. And let's pop back into our camera view. All right, so we can kind of see here how this is already beginning to fall off into some sort of like atmospheric-y kind of visual. So I like that. I think that's good. I might decide that I don't want it to have that edge be so feathered like I have here. Maybe I want it to be something that's a lot sharper. What I'll need to do is, let's do this. Let's go into update check and not do the camera. And so we can pop out here and I can take this volume. I can begin moving it slightly back and we can see, maybe where this will fall on the character's head here. I might even go into this volume, into the medium, and let's say like 0.25 of that step length. This is definitely beginning to be kind of cool here. Now, with the way that we're locked up, we can kind of see the end of the shoulder of the character. I don't want that in my render, because that kind of kills the illusion of it as far as I'm concerned. So let's pop back into our camera and say update check on the camera. And let's just slowly kind of zoom in here. I'm going to right click and say toggle info off so we can see that. So we're still very clearly seeing that. I'm going to maybe center my character up a little bit more. Maybe zoom in. I don't know. It doesn't necessarily have to be framed up, centered. There's a lot of things that we can do here to play around, but let's find out in a little bit how really we want this to be fully adjusted. We'll keep going with the lighting. I mean, just this by itself, I'm already fairly pleased with. And let's start adding some lights. So I think first, let's maybe go in and dive into some HDRIs and begin importing those in. All right. So I'm going to use Grayscale Gorilla's HDRI link here, set this up because I love using all these different HDRIs that they have. I mean, look at that. I mean, even just the first one, whatever, like it was clicked by default, like gives us such a mood. But like this is so photorealistic for like look development. This is like kind of like unmatched. If I was pitching on a title sequence of some sort right now, I would 100% be going to these LightStage assets to build those frames and customize them. All right, so what's the look of this going to be? I think that's kind of the next question. And with this HDR primary environment, that's great. I'm going to add in a texture environment, and I'm going to change the texture environment just to visible environment, and maybe go about making this. Well, not quite sure yet. I love turquoise. I love how like turquoise and magenta kind of look together. So maybe I'll do something like that. Maybe I just go a little bit more into this blue spectrum, something like that. I might change this up. Not 100% sure yet. So we've got kind of the background sky. That's going to be our visible. You can see nothing really changed here as far as the visual, but we do have this volume here that is pretty dense. And we could start messing around with maybe what the absorption of that is. Right now it's kind of got this gray, but what if I bring this into that turquoise as well? Now it's getting a little more green than it is turquoise. So maybe bring a little bit more of that blue. And already, just like this by itself, it's kind of amazing when you have these kind of assets, what all you're able to make with them so quickly, right out of the gate. And so I might add in an area light. Let's see what we can do here. So if I add an area light into my scene, and I'm going to do the thing again where I say hold on the updating of the camera, and that way we can pop out of the camera and I can just kind of a little bit more easily direct where this light is. I'm also going to hide the volume. I don't need to see that currently in my scene. And so I'm going to rotate my light around. Let's see. We'll go backlighting could be pretty epic, but as of right now, I don't want to do that. So let me just rotate this light 90 degrees this way and begin to move it back. Now, obviously, this is going to really blow out my character, so I will scale this light down. I am going to change the size of it as well as the position, and maybe kind of bring this more towards the front of my character. All right, perfect. So here that is. Obviously, it's really illuminating the front face here. Again, inside of our camera, now that we pop back in, I will say, let's update the camera. We can always go in here and in the camera imager so easily take down or increase the highlight compression, right? You can see that takes all that kind of hotspot out. I do like a little bit of that hotspot so we can see that directional light and where it's coming from. Maybe in this light, though, we begin to add in some light texture. So I'll come in here into Octane and do an RGB spectrum and add in maybe a magenta, maybe something that will like kind of really pop, or like a salmony magenta. Now it's kind of overwhelming as it is right now, so let's go back into this area light. I'm not going to mess with the intensity, but actually into the details. And let's go like 10 on the width. Let's go like 5 on the width. Something like that's kind of cool. I can angle that just a bit. So I like starting projects and not really having a big clear direction on where I'm going and just kind of see where it ends up. You know, I think that's kind of fun sometimes because then you can just explore. You're not really like needing to look at a bunch of references or anything like that. You just kind of look at what it is that you're building and kind of take it from there. I use the camera imager and lots of these settings inside the Octane camera constantly when I'm building my scenes. I might increase the exposure of this just a little bit, maybe bring down this gamma a little bit too, because I really do want these colors that I'm putting in here to really kind of pop. And so I don't think I'm going to do any kind of vignette, but right now you can see that this light, although it looks cool on the face of the character, we are kind of losing a bit of that turquoise background that I want to bring back in, because those colors together, I think, is really going to be the combination that sells this piece. So I will go into this light and maybe even decrease the width of this again. I'm fine with the height being a little bit longer, and I might bring in the light a little closer to the face. So let's do that here. Let's pop out to the camera, and where's that light at? Here's the light. So let me bring this in a little closer. We'll see, yeah, there's the light right there. We can see it's kind of proximity. So now we can get kind of a tighter fall off here, right? Where it doesn't spread out as much. Now, how far back I want to go, that's kind of the question. That's kind of cool. Now it's a little too intense. It is rather close, so I might need to bring this intensity down. Maybe pull this back just a little bit more. Yeah, and let's get another light. I'll probably just copy this light, and I'll rotate it, and this should be behind the character here. That's the goal with this one, and I can increase the width a little bit more on it, and I'm hoping that this light now, right, will begin to capture the fog that's in the back of my scene. So kind of slide this back so that Octane fog, right, and you can see it's pulling in magenta back there. Let's increase the intensity back to 100, so we should start to see it brighten up over here. I'll go into my camera too, and let's drop this hot pixel remover down a little bit, 0.45 or something, just to maybe help increase the kind of render speed. And let's go back into my camera view, and let's take that backlight. Now let's change it from that magenta and go back into that kind of turquoise. Excellent. All right, I think this front light is a bit too close to the character still, so I am going to pull this back. And again, this is all, kind of just back and forth, and I'm fine working that way because that's really kind of how you begin to discover a lot of this. And so let's go into this first one here. You kind of discover what the look is that you want, what you don't like, what you do like. Let's move this maybe over to the side a little bit too. And I'm happy punching this color and making it intense. I think this is a bit too intense though. Let's bring this light down even more. And we might even want to hop into our HDRI. Maybe this is not the best HDRI that we've got. I mean, we didn't even really select it. It was just whatever was default. However, I do like it. So, just keep that in mind, like where it's located. So it's the 3 softbox look. We can always hop back to that. But I really like going through here and just saying, hey, is there any other kind of lights that we really dig? And so, I mean, there are some that offer some kind of blue option. Like that is kind of cool because I do want to push that blue a little bit more, especially if I'm hitting it in the front with that kind of magenta. And now you can kind of see this getting pushed a little bit more. The brightness is kind of brought up as well. Not too bad. Let's keep going. Let's see the magenta, right? I think that's going to push a little bit too much of the magenta look. Here's kind of a green. That's kind of nice. It's spilling in more in those shadows. You can see more of that green kind of comes in there. Now, there's a lot of light that's being offered from those ones that I just selected. Let's try a green that's maybe got a little bit more, higher contrast in there. So now you can see we're kind of back into this like darker neon world. I'm not too worried about it making it bright though, because I know I'll always be able to come in and add mess with my camera imagery a little bit, add and adjust the gamma and adjust the exposure. These individual, obviously this light is facing directly on. So let's take some of these and let's begin to rotate them. So let's go into our GRI and rotate them on the X-axis. You can see, right? You can see so when it phases and when it doesn't, something that comes in just from the side here. Let's go back into this. Let's go even less on the power and intensity of that magenta light coming in. Keep going. I really like, Grayscale Gorilla's HDRI assets that you have. Being able to just change lighting on the fly like this is really rather nice. I actually really dig this one. I think this is really beginning to give us something super cool. I might mess around with this magenta light that we have here again though, and maybe bring this closer in to the character yet again. Let's see, so we can see it in our scene. I can hide that visibility in a second, but I kind of want my lighting to almost get a bit like more graphic light, like become a designer with this. Even take that down, so even if it's like a sharp streak on the character's face, I think that could be cool. Let's hide the visibility of that light here, so it is just a streak. Like I love that look. I think that look is pretty cool. Let's get a little bit closer and maybe mess with the height a little bit more. I don't think I needed to spill on the background as much, so let's go into the light itself and take that height way down. Maybe something like that. That's cool. And see how it's kind of like it's being captured kind of in the Octane fog volume here. You can see the top and the bottom. Now, I don't particularly like that because it's kind of the shape of the light, but I think I can play with this a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to slide this over I think this light on the character kind of hitting more on the eye will kind of help give a better kind of focal point to maybe where I want the viewer to look. The ear's really standing out right now too because it's not going to any of that fog. Maybe there's some things that we can do kind of accent that as well. So if you remember me mentioning this kind of like streak that we see at the top and at the bottom, we might want to push this idea. So if I go into my post-processing here and we go into my glare, right now it's kind of glaring everything overall, so we might want to kind of cut that off. So maybe it just focuses on some of the hottest highlights here. And let's see, we'll probably mess a little bit more with the cutoff area, maybe bring this down slightly. Yeah, maybe something like that. We'll dial this in. I'm going a little bit more extreme on it right now. And let's see, glare amount. Let's go with one streak here, and we can change the angle, right? So remember I talked about that how we're able to see the kind of area light still in here. But if I have a glare and a streak that kind of pushes that vertical look, you might be able to kind of blend this together and use this as kind of a design element to this. I kind of like how it's getting blown out a little bit. This is really starting to have some kind of interesting character to it. Again, you can always go in and mess with that highlight compression if you don't want it so blown out, which I probably do. I'll increase this a lot, not all the way. I kind of like how we're kind of pushing some of these limits. Let's mess with this gamma a little bit. Maybe mess with the saturation. Yeah, something like that looks pretty nice too. All right, so I think like we're starting to develop an actual mood to this, right? This has got its own kind of visual language and aesthetic right now. And I think, at this point, let's start focusing on some alternate color stuff and throw maybe some denoiser as well in here. Maybe even some bokeh, right? So this is how I start looking at it. I feel like we've pretty much got a nice visual look here, but what else can we do? Is there some geometry we can add to the character here? And I think all that stuff is really going to kind of push us to the next spot. So let's actually do that next. Let's see if we can incorporate some sort of additional geometry to add for another focal point. All right, so let's get some geometry going in here. So I'm going to get maybe like a cone. Now this could be kind of challenging. We'll see, because I'm using the Orbix file just to kind of reference the geometry here of the human scan. So let's change some of these here. Let's go, just make this somewhat reasonable of a size. So we might have to do some kind of maneuvering here to line this up with how we've imported the geometry. Now you can go into standalone with the Lightwave scans, or with the LightStage scans, and you can export out all the geometry and kind of rebuild it yourself. But I love having the kind of materials already made for me and stuff like that when I'm using this. Now, obviously, this is rather bright right now. Maybe what we'll do is actually just pop out from the camera altogether, kind of zoom back in here so we don't have, those effects, those post effects, and now we can just try to line this up. I think what I'm going to do, let's scale this down again a little bit more, rotate this. What's nice is actually seeming like it's not going to be as difficult to line up as maybe I had thought for a moment. Maybe increase this height a little bit more, and let's change the placement, bring this out. And this scan, it looks like the character had kind of like an ear piercing and had it removed for the scan or something like that. And let's just kind of more or less line this up right there. I'll bring it in. Yes, something like this might end up being cool. I don't know. We might use it, we might not. And let's go back into our camera view. And, maybe change the materials here. I don't know. Maybe this will work, maybe it won't. Maybe just like a like a neon ring here would work. Obviously with it completely blowing out because there's no real material on there, it's not looking quite right. But I'm trying to think, is there any sort of design that I could incorporate that is coming out from this that would look cool and not super distracting? I don't know. I might scrap this idea. But, you can see kind of how my brain's working right now on possibly integrating and incorporating something else. Why don't we just see this through a little bit? Let's go and grab a diffuse material. And in this diffuse material, let's open that up. And I will grab a emission, let's say texture emission. Let's throw in a RGB spectrum again in here. And let's make this, I don't know, like a lime green of some sort. Cool. Turn that diffuse off. We don't need that. Let's say surface brightness. Let's just add this to this cone for now. Yes, way too intense, the emission. Kind of figured that would happen. So let's dial this way back. Oh no, even having some cool stuff that's got additional light streak is kind of wild. You can see that sometimes little happy accidents happen too. This is not the look that I want for this, but that's why I love, it's funny saying this while you're watching kind of a tutorial here, but this is why it's a walkthrough and not a tutorial because this is the great thing about just going and playing and exploring any sort of medium and not just watching a step-by-step thing on how to create something, because during the exploration, you're going to come up with things that you would 100% not have come up with had you just been watching a step-by-step tutorial. This is not a step-by-step tutorial. As you can see, I'm just kind of working along here and exploring as I'm going. And I'm going to change the radius of this and make it really kind of slender. And I'm going to also change the rotation. I might have to redo the position of this also. Let's do that because I want this to be able to be seen across the whole thing. So let's move that in, because right now the angle that I had previously, it was poking into the head, and so you couldn't see it go out to the side. So it was feeling a little bit unbalanced for my image that is kind of more balanced, and centered. So perfect. Now that's in the right location. Let's go back in here and maybe even move this through a little bit more. Let's keep going. So maybe it's 50-50, halfway in, halfway out. Let's just wait for this render to kind of resolve itself for a moment, and then we'll hop right back in. All right. So after looking at this just for a second, I think having this angle being horizontal doesn't do anything for the image. Some of these strong verticals are bothering me a little bit too, but let's take this cone here and let's rotate it. My first thought is what if it was, at the jawline? My other thought was what if it followed more of this line from kind of the eyelid coming down and the eyebrow coming down? So let's try both of those really quick. Let's rotate it more on an angle like that. That helps break up some of the strong verticals and horizontals that we're having. Let's see, let's rotate it and maybe match the angle of the jawline. Let's see what that looks like. That's kind of cool too. I actually think I prefer it the other way though, because that's kind of helping point to our focal points that we kind of are establishing here. So let's maybe make it just a little bit more of an angle, and then we'll have to go back in and reposition. And I might just remove this whole thing altogether. I haven't made up my mind yet if this is something I want to keep or not, but having the addition of the geometry could be kind of cool. Let's go back into my camera imager here. In a post-production, we haven't messed with bloom at all. I don't want this thing to get over the top. And now we do have my cutoff here, set. So it's just kind of marking these. So bloom is not going to really do much for the entire image, just for those kind of areas. So I don't even know if that's something that we'll want. Maybe change up. The glare might just be a bit obnoxious right now. Let's dial that back down. And something that I'm going to do Let's go back into this area light, this first one, and I might reduce the height. I was trying to avoid doing that, but I really don't like the vertical streak as much that I'm getting, so I'm just kind of reducing that down so it's not as obvious. I don't mind a little bit of it, but not crazy intense. And then maybe the angle of the glare. Let's see. That's pretty cool, pretty intense. But I think I could get behind this. Let's see if I can match that angle up perfectly with the angle of that geometry. There we go. That's kind of interesting. The only thing I don't like about it is that we do lose that it's a piece of geometry at all. Now it's just kind of a lighting thing. But again, that's what the beauty is of exploring, because now I'm like, what if this piece happened again? And again, oh, not there. And again. And maybe we'll do one more. Maybe we'll take this first one. I don't know if we want 3 or more. Let's see if one looks good down here. Again, you know, we're trying to take a more graphic approach with this look. I think something like that is pretty cool, actually. Let's mess around with the material a little bit. Let's go more of a green, because it's getting a little yellow. So just a little bit more green in there. And then let's go into the emissions. And right now the power set really low at 3, but let's increase this. Let's just go crazy on it. You know, even before it resolves here, we get all these kind of artifacts. Pretty interesting to look at. Definitely not something I'd want for any kind of the final. Let's reduce it even more. Yeah, so now when you reduce it too much, though, you know, it seems just like geometry's piercing through the head. Not really the look that I'm hoping for. So it's bringing maybe to 4. Yeah, I like all of them. I don't know if I like the last one I did down here. Kind of like them bringing your eye upward a little bit. I think that's kind of nice. Let's go back into the camera imager and the post processing. Let's see what glare amount of 2 does. 3. Kind of blowing it out just a bit much. Let's go glare power down a little bit. Camera imager. Maybe increase the exposure. Mess with this gamma. I like bringing it down so we get some more contrast in there, which is what I'm going for when I mess with the gamma on this. Yeah, this has got a really cool feel. Now, I typically will just like finish everything here in Octane and really kind of dial in my total image here. But I think I want to kind of soften and lighten up some of the contrast to this and kind of give it more of a cinematic thing. So I think after we render this out, let's take another look at this, and maybe we'll do a couple post effects and we'll hop inside of After Effects. So let's do that next. Let's say this is at a pretty good spot. I like where it's headed. Again, just fun exploration, and I'll see you in After Effects. Inside After Effects now, let's just quickly grab an adjustment layer, throw that in here. You can obviously just apply it right on top of your render. I like doing the adjustment layer though, because I like turning it on and off and whatever. Something that's actually a part of my constant workflow, obviously Octane, now these LightStage assets, but also the Grayscale Gorilla, the HDRIs like I was just using, as well as their LUTs that are you can use inside After Effects as well as Premiere. And there might be a couple other things too, but I love just going through it. So I'm just going to quickly take a little snapshot here. Now I had an idea in my head of what I wanted. I wanted something. Let me just expand these open so we can see the names of them a little bit more. I wanted something that kind of faded the blacks a little bit and gave me a little bit of a cinematic feel. Let's see what like this cool faded blacks looks like. That's interesting. It's kind of blowing this out a little bit too much, so that's not really the vibe that I want to go to. Let's see, warm faded black. So it's interesting. Again, still kind of blowing out a little bit. I know I can kind of control some of this stuff. I do like a little bit of that warmth. It's kind of nice in there. Um, let's just see what clean looks. So that might just give it a little bit more overall contrast. Yeah, it makes it pop a little bit. Makes the character's face separate it from that background, which I don't really want for this one. I do like some of that contrast that we're getting in here. We could obviously build some like masks and stuff like that. But just like go through and if you have the GSG Plus, you'll be able to get this and download it and place it in here. Let's see what even like vibe with that. Like see how it's kind of fading the black level. It's also now it's kind of blowing out a little bit more than maybe I'd want. Let's see gallery photo, which tends to have a lot more contrast. I do really like that filmic outdoor. I might end up going with that. Let's see, pro color typically has more contrast as well. Maybe a little bit too faded. You see it's got a lot of blues, which is taking out a lot of that nice magenta that we're putting in there. Shady porch brings a lot of blues into that as well. Let's just see what skin tone hopper does. That's interesting. I actually really am liking this filmic outdoor. But I just feel that it might be a bit too intense, like because I already blew it out a little bit and overexposed it in Octane, like intentionally for that look. But now you can see like this is what it looked like before. This is what it looks like after. It does boost some of that contrast. It's just a bit too intense overall. So what I'll do, since I have it as an adjustment layer, is I'll just bring the opacity down to maybe like 50% here. And now we can see what it looked like before and after, right? So it's just super subtle. Like there's not a whole lot, but it does give it a look. I could always go back in, and now I'm just on the actual render layer and see, if there's any other kind of effect. Like this brings out that warmth a heck of a lot more. I could add some basic curves or levels or something like that. Let's do that. Let's get some levels first and add the levels in here. And let's mess around with this and let's pull some of the inputs back and forth. Let's try something else here. Let's go the curves. Because with curves, what's really nice is you can actually bring colors into specific stuff too. So I'll show you like into like the highlights or the shadows. So if I want these highlights to kind of be less intense, right? I could always come right in here. I don't want the midtones maybe to be less intense, but maybe just the hottest highlighted area. And so now you can see as I maybe turn that off and on, you can see how just the really intense areas get brought back a little bit. I might have gone a little too far on it. Maybe pull this up a little bit. Maybe it does grab a little bit more of those midtones in with it. And you can see here's the kind of difference. And it's just those subtleties. That's how I kind of do my compositing. It's all about the subtleties that we kind of put in there. Kind of actually like it better without this blushing, although I do like that it increases some areas. I like this kind of like almost like dead desaturated look. I don't know, I can go back and forth on that one. So this is where just dial it in, have some fun with it, push and pull the curves. You can go in, like I was mentioning, to the curves here. And if I were going to like the blue or the red or the green here, and I were to mess with that, you can see as I pull that in the highlights now or in the shadows, you'll be able to either you'll be able to start pushing some blues and magentas and stuff like that into it, and you get a totally different feel. And same thing with the shadowed area, right? If I start pushing and pulling this, right, you see it's going more green, going more blue. I actually dig this kind of blue that's in there. Let's go into the red. Let's move some of this red. Right, so that's crushing some blue if we go that way with it. If we go here, it's going to start pulling some more of that red through. Let's push it that way. And let's maybe go into the highlights, right? Bring some more warmth into that highlight, or not, right? Or pull it away. I'll do just a little bit in there. And then, yeah, I mean, let's take a look at what it looked like before and after, right? So subtle difference, but there is definitely a difference. And sometimes just giving it that kind of touch goes a long way. So let's go back into the RGB spectrum, and maybe this black level I'll move up, right? So remember I said like I wanted this to kind of take away some of that contrast from the black in here and give it that filmic look. I think that's good. Now the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add one more adjustment layer in here. So say layer and new and adjustment layer. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little like grain or noise in here. So let's add, and that's going to help, continue to push. And I'll just change this from preview to final output, and we'll do the whole thing. That kind of cinematic feel to it, that film grain look. Now you could do one of the presets. Sometimes I'll go in and like mess around with like various preset options that I like. Maybe I'll bring the intensity down to 0.5, the size down to 0.5. Yeah, something like that. It's soft, it's subtle. This is also going to help if you compress this and you get any kind of banding on any of these real smooth gradients. Sometimes adding grain, that's like an old broadcast trick that I learned from back in the day. And that can really help remove any kind of banding and artifacting you get too by adding a little grain. So you get the bonus of a little film, as well as you can reduce any kind of banding or artifacting. That's it, everybody. Thank you so much for following along. I hope you liked it. I hope you're still enjoying the design walkthrough. You can get kind of an idea of how I work and how I build my scenes and how I kind of approach them and think about lighting and all that. So until next time, peace.